So Lisa, if you could start the recording now, that'd be great. So this is what we're going to cover today during the session. So we'll start with some key features of the postdoctoral fellowships, including the UK's status. Okay, so very briefly, the Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowships are a continuation of the individual fellowships as they were called under Horizon 2020, which was the predecessor to Horizon Europe. In terms of UK status, so we can still apply to the postdoctoral fellowships for their call this year. And the UK are currently treated as if we are fully associated at application stage, even though negotiations are still ongoing at the moment. So when the results are announced of the fellowships, the likely scenarios are either the UK will be associated to Horizon Europe following these successful negotiations, and then you just receive your funding as you normally would from the EU Commission, or the UK Research and Innovation or UCRI guarantee will still apply, which successful applicants can receive funding under. So that UCRI guarantee currently applies to calls with deadlines on or before the 30th of June. But we've spoken to the UK Research Office and they would expect if the UK hasn't associated to Horizon Europe, then this guarantee would be extended to cover projects. So at this stage, they don't have any reason to believe there'll be issues with funding successful projects. So they're still actively encouraging people to apply. There's actually a webinar that we're attending tomorrow on Horizon Europe Association. So if you'd like to hear any more about that, let us know and we can send you further information after tomorrow's session. So the Marie Curie Actions are the European Union's flagship funding programme for doctoral education and postdoctoral training of researchers. And all of the Marie Curie Actions are in Pillar 1 of Horizon Europe, which is called Excellent Science. They all work on a bottom-up basis, so you can apply within any research domain. And it's not restricted to STEM research, so basically you can define your own research project. So the main focus is on the people behind the research, supporting research training, career development, and considering the impact on researchers, institutions, and systems. It provides people with the opportunity to develop their careers while pursuing research projects. And this is important as you need to think about the training opportunities which will be provided as well as the research project itself. Another of the key factors is mobility. So this idea of moving talent around and within Europe, but also making sure it's retained in Europe as well. And people are encouraged to give fellows opportunities within the academic and non-academic sectors, whilst also considering intersectoral and interdisciplinary factors. Okay, so moving on to look at a further few key points. So there's a single mobility rule, which means that researchers cannot have resided or carried out their main activity in the country of their host organisation. So that would be in the UK if they're coming to Wolverhampton for more than 12 months in the 36 months immediately prior to the call deadline. So that's one of the one of the eligibility criteria. So in terms of secondment duration, a maximum of 1/3 of the total project time can be spent on secondment. You need to aim for scores over 90% to have a chance of being funded. And there are resubmission restrictions, so you won't be able to resubmit to next year's call if your proposal scored less than 70% this time. And there's an incentive for non-academic involvement. So where an individual intends to go to Europe on a non-academic placement, you can apply for an additional 6 months on top of the project's duration. A PhD is required, so the fellow must have a PhD at the time of the call deadline. And they're also limiting the overall research experience for the fellow. So they can't have more than 8 years of research experience after their PhD has been awarded. And this is another mechanism to control the number of applications and also to ensure that those applying are most likely to get the maximum benefits from the training provided. Ezekiel, have you got a question?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I thought I didn't hear you very well. You said one needs a score of 70% to be able to resubmit next year.
Yeah.
I thought the score was much higher than that.
No, that's the threshold, yeah. If you want to, so if you're unsuccessful with your application this time and it's scored, 70% or more, you'd be able to modify that and resubmit for next year. Does that make sense? But if it didn't reach that 70% score threshold, then you wouldn't be able to resubmit.
Okay, I was discussing with somebody, and then they said to me that that you need a seal of excellence before you can resubmit. And I said, I don't have a seal of excellence and I want to resubmit.
According to the guidelines,
yeah,
that's what that's the information that's provided in the guidelines, is you have to score a certain amount in order for you to be able to resubmit next year. So for example, let's say if you scored 65% last year, you wouldn't be able to be resubmitting again this year because you've not hit that minimum threshold.
Okay. Okay, my situation is this. My resubmission is from 2018, and that time is scored 75. So,
okay.
Yeah, that would be okay because that would have been under Horizon 2020 anyway. So it's a different, we're in Horizon Europe now, and this 70% threshold only applies to Horizon Europe anyway. So,
okay, the person was adamant that I can't resubmit that bit.
Sorry, they were adamant that you couldn't resubmit.
Okay.
Yes, but it's good that you're telling me that it's possible for me to.
Okay, I would suggest that we pick this up again after this briefing session, and we can talk about it a little bit further then. Is that okay?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so moving on to the two different types of fellowships. So the first one being the European Postdoctoral Fellowships. So these are open to research of any nationality who wishes to engage with a host in Europe. So they can move from any country in the world or move within Europe, as long as they abide by the mobility rule. So the project duration must be between 12 to 24 months. There can be an optional secondment, but this can't exceed 1/3 of the total fellowship duration. And as previously mentioned, you can have an additional period of up to 6 months for a non-academic placement, which can be in an EU member state or a Horizon Europe associated country. So if you want to have the 6-month non-academic placement, that this must be requested and justified why this is appropriate within the proposal, and that placement would take place at the end of the project. So the university usually submits more applications to these European fellowships, with the supervisor being based at the university and the fellow also coming to Wolverhampton to work together on a research project and develop the fellow skills. And as mentioned, they can also have secondments and a placement. So the other type is the global postdoctoral fellowships. So these are open to European nationals who want to go beyond the boundaries of Europe. So there's an outgoing phase, which is the time spent outside of Europe. And this can be a maximum of 24 months with a mandatory return phase of 12 months. Again, it's a maximum of 1/3 of the project time to spend on secondments. And there's also the option to have the non-academic placement, which is an additional 6 months at the end of the project also. So looking at the eligibility of the fellow or the researcher, so this doesn't apply to the supervisor. So they must be in possession of a PhD, and there's a definition of that in the top box. And at the call deadline, they cannot have more than 8 years full-time research experience. Okay. So there are a couple of exceptions for the 8 years research experience, this being maternity or paternity leave. So this can be extended by 18 months for each child if on maternity leave. And if it's paternity leave, it's the documented time taken until the core deadline. So this eligibility criteria applies to the fellow, not the supervisor. So there isn't any such eligibility criteria on the supervisor, but they'd obviously need to explain in the application your level of experience in supervising and developing others. So moving on to the budget. So this is worked out through unit cost, as is the same with all the Marie Curie actions, and like the predecessors, the individual fellowships as well. So you can see there are 3 unit costs allocated under the researcher, and there's 2 different ones for the institution. So in the application, it's really nice and simple. You just enter the project duration and the secondments, and it will automatically calculate the budget for you. So all you'll need to do for the fellow or researcher is to select whether they be eligible for the family allowance or not. So the living allowance will have a country correction coefficient applied, and this reflects the cost of living in a member state. For the global fellowships, this is applied for both the outgoing and return phase. And as you can see at the bottom, this is high for the UK. So it's 136.9%. So what we'd actually receive if a fellow was coming to Wolverhampton would be a little bit higher than the unit costs there because of the cost of living in the UK, basically. So the researcher unit costs must be used to benefit the researcher, and these are paid through salary. So these are gross amounts, they would be taxed. The family allowance, the definition has changed. For this, where it used to reflect the fellows' like marital status at the time of the call deadline, it now reflects that this status can change throughout the project. So if the recruited fellow had family obligations during the duration of the project, which is a marriage or a relationship of equivalent status, or they have children who are being maintained by the researcher, the family allowance would also be paid to him or her. So the institutional costs, the research training and networking costs, as it says, these are for activities for the researcher to benefit them. And the management and indirect costs, these are to contribute to management costs, so time and institutional overheads. We can also work with you to ensure that any activities you've got planned for the fellow, particularly using the researcher research training and networking costs, we can work with you to make sure what any activities you've got planned would be covered by these unit costs. Okay, I'll now hand over to Lisa, who's going to go through the award criteria.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Helen. So the proposals themselves will be evaluated and ranked against these 3 areas: excellence, impact, and the quality and efficiency of the implementation. We'll go through these now in a little more detail. So first of all, looking at the excellence. So when writing your application, I suggest you consider the points that you can see here on this screen, as this is what the reviewers will be looking for and obviously evaluating against. It's important to describe the quality and pertinence of the objectives. So are they measurable and can they be realistically achieved? Discuss how the project will go beyond the state of the art and the extent to which the proposed work is ambitious. And also describe and explain the methodology, including concepts, models, and any assumptions that will underpin the work itself. And explain how it will enable you to deliver the project objectives. So it's also important here to refer to any challenges that you may have identified, and discuss how you would overcome these. You will also need to describe the planned training activities that you have and discuss the fact that the transfer of knowledge is a two-way exchange, so between the researcher and the host. And as a minimum requirement, you also need to describe the qualifications and experiences of you, the supervisor. So it's important to provide information around your level of experience on the research topic that you're proposing and any track record. You'll also need to discuss hosting arrangements. So I'd suggest sort of describing and detailing how a researcher would be integrated within the team, as well as the university, and of course other supporting services that would be available. And also discuss how the researcher's past experience and the proposed research will contribute to their professional development throughout the fellowship. Moving on to the impact, again, consider the points that are on the slide. And as a minimum, the reviewers and evaluators will be looking for a couple of specific things here, around specific measures to enhance career perspectives and employability of the researcher for both within and outside of academia. And they will also be looking for information around the contribution of the proposed skills development to the future career of the researcher. So again, go into this in detail. And you'll also need to address dissemination and exploitation. And this is quite an important point because this is becoming a bigger requirement. So describe activities, including any communication activities. So talk about the planned measures that will maximise the impact, and provide a plan for the dissemination and exploitation, again, including your communication activities, and detail the target groups that you will be addressing. For the communication measures and any public engagement strategy, show how you will inform and reach out to society and show how these activities will be planned. And if relevant to you and to the project, discuss the strategy for the management of intellectual property. So foreseen protection measures such as patents, design rights and any copyrights. And how will these be used to support the exploitation? I know there's quite a bit of text on these slides, so as Helen mentioned earlier, we will be sending a copy of these out to you, so don't feel like you've got to be frantically writing notes. So looking at the implementation requirements, again, consider the points that are on the slide, and you'll also need to be addressing the overall structure of the work plan. So including your deliverables, milestones and work packages. Please include a Gantt chart for this information. This is what the evaluators will be looking for. You'll also need to describe the mechanism in place for assessing and mitigating any risks. And talk about the quality and capacity of the university, including infrastructure, logistics and facilities. These should be detailed in Part B, Section 5 of the application. We can help with this section, so please do stay in regular contact with us, and we can support with providing any standard statements if required. I would suggest reading and rereading the funder guidance notes and write the proposal to this. As again, I know I've probably repeated this a few times, but this is exactly what the evaluators will be looking for and will be marking against. Okay, so moving on to look at training requirements. There are some typical training requirements listed on this slide. And as previously mentioned, there is a focus obviously on training needs. So it's important that you must have a clear training needs plan detailed, and make it clear that the training is through the research itself, and be realistic with the activities and the plans that you have, and have a well-defined career advancement objectives list. Looking at the submission itself, as you're no doubt aware, the submission needs to be completed via the funder and tenders portal, and it needs to contain all mandatory parts of the application, including the annexes and any other supporting documents. The application itself is split up into two parts, Part A and Part B. Part A is completed directly on the portal itself, and this contains administrative information. And Part B is around the technical part of the project, and this can be downloaded from the portal, completed, and then it has to be re-uploaded as a PDF back into the system. Any annexes and supporting documents are also available in the portal, and again must be uploaded as a PDF document. If you'd like a copy of the Part A and Part B, please let us know and we can send this over to you, and we can support with accessing the portal and setting up the application itself. One final note to mention regarding the submission is we've recently been made aware that the portal itself will be moving over to a two-stage authentication process to gain access to the portal. This will be becoming mandatory soon, but it isn't mandatory at the moment. It's possible that it may be come September when we're actually submitting these proposals. So if you do need any help with setting this up, please do let us know and we can support with this. So obviously Helen and I have gone through a lot of information there. But please be aware that there is support available to you, so you're not out there on your own. There's support available from the bidding support team, so Helen and I, plus our colleagues, the research development managers, and we can also bring in support from others such as impact officers or legal services if required. The research development managers, as you may be aware, include Amy Tan. She works with engineering and physical sciences. Susan Goodlad supports life sciences, and Francesco Paradiso supports the FABS faculty. Once you have let us know your intent to submit, if you're not already in touch with your RDM, we will put you in touch with them to obviously help and support you with developing the proposal. And this slide really just shows some of the types of support that is available. So if you were to go ahead with the this fellowship, we would suggest putting a timeline together for when to have a draft ready, so it can be reviewed and advice can be provided to make the most of our time. We can provide advice and guidance on the funder and the application process. And again, we can act as a critical friend and review proposals and provide feedback in order to strengthen the application itself. We can also provide institutional information, as I mentioned previously, such as around the research environment and institutional support provided. And prior to submission, a technical eligibility check will be provided to ensure that the proposal itself meets all of the criteria. And as I mentioned before, we can support with setting up the application on the portal. We will also guide you through any internal processes, including PCB, where your internal approvals need to be gained. So that kind of brings us to the end of today's session. There are some key points that I'd like you to take away from this session. The main one being around reading the guide for applicants. Read the document, reread it, as it contains the rules and conditions of the call. And it also contains information around the instructions for completing Part A and Part B, as well as the templates. And as I have mentioned previously, it details the evaluation criteria. So write the proposal against each and every point you see there, and show an understanding of the fellow's requirements in a professional development and the needs for the project. And we ask that you notify us by the 30th of May if you would like to go ahead with submission, as we can then ensure that the relevant support is allocated. And the final point really is around, I'd suggest that you submit on a regular basis, because each and every time that you submit it will override the previous submission. This just eliminates any problems further down the line if, as we're getting closer to the deadline day, if there's lots of people using the portal, sometimes there can be IT issues. So we just suggest that you submit as often as you can. Sorry, Roy, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much both for the information. So I previously submitted 3 fellowship applications through Horizon 2020 in 2016-17. And out of the 3, 2 of them passed the threshold, but they didn't get funding because of the, other criteria that they consider, like gender equality and other things that, the details that was involved.
Yeah.
So now, I mean, those topics are probably a bit now older compared to, I was looking at the Horizon Europe criteria, because the criteria change in terms of priorities and different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On that time, Tatiana was here and she helped academics to find fellows from across the Europe. So there was a platform that we used to post our area of the research and looking for fellows. So I don't know anybody personally at the moment, but I really would like to work with someone and support someone. Is there any platform or is there any way that you could support us to find a fellow? Or
Yes, there is a platform. And in fact, this is something that I have supported previously with. We can take this up again after this session, but yes, there's a platform out there. What I can do is contact you in order for you to basically complete a form for me with the information that I need, and we can put it online on your access.
yes,
and that will we can advertise the post for you.
perfect.
So that is certainly something that we can help with.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you very much, Lisa.
No problem. Oh, Ezekiel, sorry, have you got a question as well?
Yeah. Thank you so much. First of all, just to acknowledge, you are the one that helped me to find my fellow, the one I'm applying now. So, Roya, if you work with Lisa, she will help you to find a fellow. And thank you so much, Lisa. And
That's okay. You're welcome.
The fellow is quite keen and she's working hard. In fact, she just emailed me this morning. So
oh, that's good to hear.
So it's good. Yeah. Now, the other thing I wanted you to help me refresh, at the beginning, I think there was the placement option. I can't remember how that works very well again. If the fellow were to go on placement, will they still be paid whilst they're still on placement?
Yes, as far as I'm aware, they would still receive their salary, yes.
Okay. So if I'm doing, say, the European Fellowship, and I'm applying for 24 months, can I then say I'm adding 6 months of placement on top of that? Will that work?
Yeah, that's how it would work. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that's interesting. But the placement will have to be outside the UK.
I don't think it has to be outside the UK, actually. It has to be in a non-academic sector. I'll double check that about whether it has to be outside the host country.
Okay.
I don't think it does. I think it could be in the UK as long as it's in a non-academic sector. But we will we'll check that and follow up to confirm though.
Okay. Yeah, okay. That would be good, so that we can decide on which one to go for.
Yeah. Or you could also have a secondment, which would be like in an academic organization. So that, yeah, it's a bit confusing, but their secondments and placements are very different things, and there's criteria for each in the guidance document, which we can send you the link to after the session as well.
Yeah, I'm very much familiar with the secondment. So the secondment can be to an academic institution.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's good. That will be easier for me because I have links I can easily use for the secondment, within academia. Okay.
Okay.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. That's good. Good. Okay.
This slide here is just really to show and make you aware that UCRO, the UK Research Office, are running some webinars around eligibility, practical matters, and then submission and evaluation. And you can see the dates and times detailed here. These will be delivered using Zoom, and if you feel that they are of any use to you or you would like to attend, please sign up. Helen and I will probably be attending. So if there's any useful information that we find or we hear during the sessions, obviously we would pass this information on to you. So that kind of brings us to the end of today's session. I'll leave you with our contact details. If you'd like to get in touch further, obviously as ECA we can discuss things outside of today's session. A copy of the recording and the slides will be sent out to you afterwards. So what's left to say really is thank you for your time. I hope you found it useful, and I'm going to stop the recording now.